What makes a leader successful? One of my good friends, Allan Cooper, who I'm interviewing today, shared with me a couple things that he thought makes leaders successful and also what makes leaders fail. In their heart, they have to be teachers. And the other key is their main goal is to build up their team to replace themselves. It's an interesting concept, and we're going to unpack that today in this interview with my good friend, Allan Cooper. You don't want to miss it, so let's get started. So welcome back to another episode of You're in Charge Now What? I'm your host, Glenn Pasch. And the goal of this channel, as you know, is to help those of you that now find yourself in charge of a team, a business, or a project, learn the skills necessary to build high-performing teams. Each week, we're going to focus on one topic. My guest or myself or both are going to give you some tips that have helped us grow our businesses so that you can generate consistent results and, of course, increase your bottom line. As always, if you're new to the channel, first time here, or if you've been here and you haven't subscribed yet, please click the button below. That way you'll be notified when I launch new videos out. As always, please put your comments in below. We'd like to hear what you like, what you didn't like, and always if there's a topic you want me to talk about, I'll be happy to. So I'm really excited, and it's funny, my guest, Allan Cooper here, thought we were recording, but we were just brainstorming here. I met Allan a while ago. We've always been very interesting enough. We've always stayed connected. Whenever we get together, it's like no time has passed. Love chatting with him. I wanted to bring him on because he has a really great perspective on business, leadership, and also because he has such a varied history, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. I think he's going to bring a lot of great value to you. So first off, thank you, Allan, so much for joining us today.
Mate, it's great to be here. I hope that everybody can understand the Australian accent. It's been 35 years since I left the country, but some people tell me that it's still a little difficult.
Listen, we will put little, transcriptions in the bottom there so we can translate. But before we get started, just take 30 seconds, introduce yourself, tell them, who you are, what you do, and then I want to unpack some of the things we were just talking about off air, on air.
Yeah, sure. So, I came out to the US in 1986 after spending 25 years there, so that gives you an idea of my aged veteran status in this business. It's all been in the auto side. I started selling cars for a Dodge Chrysler Jeep. Well, actually, it was just Dodge dealership back in 1986. We're also one of the first Hyundai dealerships. I sold cars from 86 through to the end of 2000. Was one of the very first dealers with Automotive with Pete Ellis when he was just a very small two-room office in Corona Del Mar, and Scott Painter with Cars Direct and everybody else like that. But it was all through the fleet department. It was all direct sales. And when everybody's talking about digital motor sales these days, we've been doing that for a long time. But I left the business in 2000, became a partner in a company called Autotown. It was the first CRM company in the industry. We had that for a couple of years. We got caught up in the tech bubble. We were just too far ahead of the curve, so to speak, which is a popular term these days, and sold that to Cobalt, and that got assumed by ADP. We then started up another company called Call Command, which became One Command, all omni-channel communications, voice, text, email, direct mail. We bought RPM from Automotive, and I left that in 2000. Sort of got caught up in the global financial meltdown.
Right.
There's all of these incidents through our history and careers in the auto industry that redirect or create opportunities for new horizons. But since 2010, I've helped a lot of companies with OEM relationships, growing their businesses here in the US, establish them in Australia, and back and forth. And that's led me to today. We're involved in a number of different enterprises, my own businesses, all around data, mobile technology, and consumer behavior.
Well, you have a lot. So Here's the key, and this is also why I wanted you here, is because a lot of what you have to offer, and a lot of the people who've been watching the show, they're not necessarily in automotive, and this was never designed to be just automotive. It's just we happen to spend a lot of time there. But just that arc of all those different businesses and different challenges, I want to talk a little bit about that, because a lot of the people who are here either are getting promoted in or coming in from the outside to take on a team, take on a challenge. They're coming in, they have to fix something. So let's start there. When you've transitioned in now, especially, and we'll work backwards, because I do want to talk about your early on, your as you shared with me, your father was in the military and that, type of environment. But when you go in now and you're saying, I'm helping companies. So when you go in to take on a project and someone says, Allan, will you help me out? And you say, sure, we will. How does your brain work? So if I'm trying to pick your brain on it, how do you assess a project, and how do you sort of look at your first, let's say, 30 days of taking over a project to understand what are the levers I have to pull first?
I think you've got to do some research. You've got to know your customer. Or your client, however you want to term this here. You have to understand their business model. And it's a great point you make. I mean, it's not just the automotive space that I'm involved in. Mm-hmm. So, in this current pandemic that we've got, that, it's not just health, it's economic, it's societal change.
Right.
So understanding the dynamics of this crossroads of this intersection of opportunity that's in front of everybody, you really got to know what's happening within that company, that environment. What's their pain point? Do the research. And then, what I've always found, if I talk dealership world here, mm-hmm. that, I'll go in and I'll talk to the owner, I'll talk to the general manager, the service director, the salespeople, the business office, find out about the culture of the company. Really dig deep into what is the operational platform that they're working from, so that you can understand where their issues are. So I'm making this generalization, but if you're going in there, and I'm going to be driving traffic for sales, then how does sales interact with the service department? How do they interact with the business office? Are there silos of power struggles that are operating in there? So simple answer: know your customer. Yeah. And the only way you do that is to do the research before you go in there. There's too many people. It's not a cookie cutter situation. Each dealership is different. Each industry is different. Each retail store is different. Each entity that you're working with as a client is their own unique character. You have to understand that animal.
And what I like about that, what I'm hearing, what I like there's some similarity, meaning what I'm hearing is you sort of have a checklist of, I have to answer these, but everybody's different. It isn't just one. It's starting to go, I have to have discussions with people. I have to unpack things. I have to follow the, almost reverse engineering. What's the end goal? What am I being brought in to accomplish? And then who are all the people in the business that affect that? What are the processes that affect that? So you have to understand where are my obstacles, so that then I can prioritize how to tweak and adjust so that I can come in here. So is one of the questions, someone asked me this the other day on one of the interviews, and I thought it was good, interesting. Is one of your questions when you go in, what authority do you have to make change? Is that something that you want to make sure you understand right from the beginning?
It's one of the first questions, and let me back into something there too. Is that what you discover? And again, we'll use the auto industry because it's a perfect example. Just because somebody excels at their particular job doesn't mean that they're necessarily the right person to be moved into a management position. Mm-hmm. So you come back to authority. You might be a gun salesman and sell 25 cars a month, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be a gun sales manager,
right?
Or a general manager. So again, this is knowing who you're dealing with. What's the DNA of the person that you're dealing with? That authority that you're talking about. it's really important that a company builds out their team based upon their strengths, knowing what their weakest links are. And if that weakest link is something that should be worked on, how do you improve that weakest link to the greatest level of competency or authority and efficiency? You have to identify those issues in there.
Do you find, so let me just jump in here for a second, because I think that was a really important thing, and I don't want the audience to sort of miss over on that, is that when you said identifying your weakest link, right? There are a lot of times where people are promoted because I have a certain skill, I'm good at a job, doesn't mean that I can teach that job or I can get a team of people to do that job. Because again, I'm very focused on myself and only have to worry about my job. Now, all of a sudden, I have to take this team. Do you find in all of your travels and all these different industries that you've worked in, is one of the reasons why companies aren't successful is because, is it they lack the ability to understand what skills, or is it the fact that they don't have a system in place to help what you just said, train that person, that weakest link? Or is it a combination of both?
It's a combination of both, but in some situations, it's individual as well. I mean, again, the situation of a gun salesman in a dealership that can sell 25 cars a month, and he could continue to grow and end up selling 100 cars a month, given the right framework. Right. And the support within the dealership, which is much more valuable to the operation of the dealership. But if you've got someone that recognizes that talent, and egos come into this too, right? And I'm going to use myself as an example here. We ended up, we sold cars. We sold a lot of cars. And I had the opportunity to go into different roles in management. And I declined that because I became an expert car salesman. As much as I didn't want to be a car salesman, that's all I ever was. I sold a lot of cars, but I could have gone into management. So going into management doesn't necessarily mean that you have the leadership skills that can be developed to build teams, because that's what happens as you build companies, is that, you can have all the talent in the world, but you've got to be able to transfer that into other areas of responsibility that can build that foundation that make it a successful company. So selling, being a gun salesman doesn't make you a great manager, doesn't make you a great detail person, doesn't make you a great organizational mind. I mean, you've got to be able to recognize that talent, and that really belongs with the owner of the dealership. If we're using auto as the example, I know we're multi-vertical here, but that the owner of a dealership has all of these skill sets. They're good at organization, they're good at structure, they're good at marketing, advertising, at discipline, at leading. My ultimate goal in any company that I've ever worked for or built or been a partner in is to find my replacement and put them in my job.
Exactly.
Because if I can do that, that just means that we've got a kick-ass company, and you continue to build upon that and take on other responsibilities and build your own horizons. That's how I got my PhD. It was a PhD on the streets. I was lucky to have great mentors and leaders that showed me the right path. And by the same token, I had some absolute idiots that weren't leaders, that thought they were, that showed me the path not to go down to. So as much as you learn from the great things you see, you can learn a lot more in many cases from those that cannot do.
Yeah, and I like that point of replacing yourself, because a few other people who I have a lot of respect for, who they are good leaders, and I firmly believe that too, is my job is to replace myself. So I can, like you said, and I like that image, because again, if your company, you can either make it wide, or let's say you're building up, if I have someone who can take care of this, I can go to the next level and start building the next level. And then we bring staff that level. And then when I get that level, I can go to next. But if I'm so afraid that if I train Allan to do what I do, someone's going to fire me, they're going to see that as, oh, well, I don't need two people doing that. To your point, that lacks vision. And some of the worst managers I've ever worked for are those who hoard, don't share, don't want to train because they're afraid of being replaced. They don't see that I can go on and do something else, and I can build on top of that to grow my company, but I can't do it if I'm still stuck on the first floor, if that makes sense.
100%. People stunt growth in companies doing it that way.
Right.
They fear their own positions. So that's where you get the negative leadership roles that tend to arise, where fear, intimidation, harassment, starts to pop up. Keep everybody controlled. Don't let people grow.
Right.
I mean, the best organizations I know have been open organizations. They encourage, educate, build, and the enthusiastic appreciation of somebody doing their job well. Recognize it, reward it.
Right.
I played a ton of rugby, mate. I mean, it goes back to what we're talking about. You're as strong as the weakest link in the team. There's 15 people on that rugby team. There's no place for a star that has the ego that it's all about him. But you have leaders that are within those teams, and you have those people that recognize where those weaknesses are and where their strengths are, and that's how you put a game strategy together. I mean, sport and business are the same to me. You're out there for the camaraderie, the win, but you've got to get from point A to point B, from one goal line to the other. You have a break in the middle. You have your half times. That's where you recuperate. You've got to have that culture within a company as well. It can't always be about productivity and work. That's the taskmaster with the whip.
Yeah, and I
you've
agree.
Got to have fun.
I think I always use the analogy of sports for very similar in terms of where your leader should be, because if you think of where the coach is, they're on the sideline watching the game being played. Then they're giving feedback, they're encouraging, or they're disciplining and saying, where were you supposed to be? You know where this is. But they're constantly out there. And so many times in business, automotive or other businesses I've gone into, what happens is that leader gets to a certain point and then disappears. They're off in an office. They're no longer watching the game being played, so to speak. Doesn't mean you have to micromanage and stay there the whole time, but you have to watch what they're doing so that you can find those times, like you just said, to compliment them, encourage them, tell them they're doing a good job. Or else what happens is you'll come out of your office one day and you'll go, how did we end up over here? Well, you weren't paying attention. Don't blame them, blame yourself. So let me ask you, because I want to go back to something we talked about early on. Your sense of leadership and, just talking about all those things that you've done, it has to be an innate trait that either was given to you as an example from family or just a trait of yours. I usually do a workshop with people when we're talking about leadership. I say, go back and look at all the things you've done. Forget the titles of the jobs and just look at what you've done. I'll bet you there's a common thread. And a lot of times leaders are people who are in charge of things. They've always been in charge of something, even without the title. They were the one that organized everybody, or they were the one who said, I think we should do this, and everybody rallied around them. Talk about yourself, because I know you mentioned your father was in the military, and now we talked about rugby. What do you think, how do you think over your life, what were the things that impacted you to build this sense of leadership?
Wow, it's a great question, mate. I mean, it's one of those things that seems to come up around psychology. Are you born with it, or is it built into you?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a combination in some people. There are certainly natural born leaders.
Right.
I think that as parents, you and I have got children. I've got one daughter. That's it. Their lives are shaped by our attitudes, our behavior, our morals, our integrity, our sense of joie de vivre. That I can see in my daughter has led her down a path into her chosen career.
Right.
And I think looking back at mine, ever since I can remember, my dad was in the military. He was a non-commissioned officer, artillery, rose to be the senior NCO, the top gunny, as you would call it out here, in artillery. His boss was the major general and a brigadier. So the three of those ran that corps in Australia. So I grew up around a lot of discipline, obviously leadership, fairly strict environment. Am I a product of his teachings, or am I also a product of a little bit of the DNA of the Cooper family? I'd have to say it's a bit of both, because if I look at, no one's ever really asked me this question, man, and I've never thought about it this way, but, you know, looking at his brothers, they went through World War II. One became a mine manager of 12 coal mines. The other became the fire chief for the fire department in Ipswich, where we were born. I went down the path of leaving high school and having a scholarship to Duntroon, which is the equivalent of West Point. I rebelled against what they wanted me to study after they decided to change tact on me, and maybe that's my leadership role, where I'm not going to do something well that I don't want to do, which is key to anybody.
Right.
You know, it's not just a job. You know, I don't work to live. I live to work, you know, and enjoy it, because that's, you know, that might be reversed on how most people might say it, but, you know, I want to have fun, and I'm going to do what I want to do. And that was the stepping stone that I had coming out of Duntroon. Someone was trying to redirect me, tell me I was going to study something that I didn't want to study. And that DNA of my own leadership qualities, if you want, and the confidence to be able to make a decision and suffer the consequences or the rewards for that, is something that was there from day one. You take responsibility for your own decisions. So leadership, I believe, is it's a combination, but it's shaped by those around us, and that ultimately starts with family. Yeah. You know, you've got a great father figure and a great mother figure in a family, then you learn respect for women, you learn respect for men. You see how love and discipline and, you know, perseverance through ups and downs in life will shape you, and that's no difference in business. I hope that answers the question in a way that...
No, I think it does, because I think that's really important, because I can look at my father and my mother, and, you know, same thing. We learn by watching, and it's the small things. It's a lot. I learned more from my father, just how he handled themselves in everyday situations. Like you said, the respect that he showed. He was not the biggest voice in the room, and he didn't want center stage, but he was highly respected. He was dependable. He took care of things. His word meant something. He used to always tell us that. That was one thing always remembered was, you know, he would always say, listen, I have your back 100%, just don't lie to me. And he would always say, your word is your most important thing to have. And I think from what you were also saying, and I think leadership has this, or people who are taking on a responsibility, it is accountability to yourself, that you are giving your word to someone. I remember when I was going to get a job when I first could go get a job. I'd work some hours. Maybe I was 15 years old. You know, that was beyond doing the newspapers and raking leaves and all that. It was like a job. And I remember it was, you know, one of those things during high school. There was a party that you could go to after a football game, but I had to work early in the morning the next day. And I was going, oh man, I got to get up. And my father looked at me and he said, you don't, just understand this. You don't have to work. You have a roof over your head. My job is to make sure you have food. But if you want extra money, then you can work. He goes, but here's the key. You gave that man, meaning the owner of the business, you gave that man your word that you're going to be there. So you will be there. But if you want to quit, then be man enough to go in and say, I'm going to quit, but don't leave him hanging. And I think those are the things in terms of running teams. Like you were saying, don't always look for a crutch. Don't blame someone else. You know, if you took on this responsibility, then you have to own it. And I think and again, that I think probably for you, I would assume, I'll let you answer, is that carried through all of your jobs and all of your positions, which is why I think then you have a great reputation and more people come to you and say, can you help? Because of that work ethic, that accountability, that will figure a way through.
100%, mate. I mean, you mentioned, first jobs. I mean, it was a similar situation. We weren't a family with a lot of money. We rented houses. My dad never owned a house until he retired. He became an avocado farmer. But, we rented houses outside of the military bases when we weren't on base. And we lived Brisbane, Sydney, Singapore, Canberra. We moved all around. But, when I was in my teenage years, I wanted spending money and save for a car and stuff. And, to use the California term, mate, I became a landscape gardener.
Right.
All I did, mowed lawns and trimmed edges and, fertilized, gardens and stuff. But I did it to the best of my ability, and I had to turn up, rain or rain or sun. It didn't matter. It still had to be done. So I had the accountability myself, and my word was good. If I was going to be there to do it, I was there to do it. And you were paid a fair dollar for doing it. So the responsibility is exactly to yourself. You've got your own accountability. You have to live with yourself, and everybody knows what that feels like. I'm a handshake guy. Shake my hand, it's a done deal.
Right.
That's how 4 dealerships, that's how I work. We never signed contracts. We agreed on a pay scale and just said, don't mess with me, don't screw me over, and we're all good. Well, there were 3 dealerships that decided to change the rules, so it was just pack up and leave. And that's important because you know what? That there was testament to the rest of my life and business relationships and where it's grown outside of just selling cars to the general community, but into the business community where friends that I had 30 years ago that might have been district managers that are now CEOs of OEMs or have gone on to become leaders in other commercial entities or sports world or entertainment. It all goes back to a handshake and having the integrity and the friendship that was based upon being reliable, truthful, and having a good heart and soul. They're simple things. I mean, it's something that I think COVID's brought it out in a lot of people. We're seeing some crazy wackos on one side, but you're also seeing the goodness in people turn up a lot more. I mean, I've always been one to, again, going back to my dad and the discipline, polish my shoes, make my bed in the morning.
Sure.
Have an iron shirt. Hell, mate, I used to know how to iron when I was 12 because that was what the army had to do. You had to iron your own clothes, right? I had to polish my shoes, but open a door for a lady, for a girl, for my mum. Always carry a handkerchief. I mean, I'm real old school, dude.
No, but that was a time, and I think it's interesting as much as we want to, even your example of, in automotive focusing on the new way to sell a car. And we were talking earlier, you were doing very similar things. It's just technology. I think there's a sense of, as much as we want things to change and be convenient and move fast, I think one of the things that COVID did for everybody is slow everyone down. Right? Everybody had to slow down. But I really do think, and again, to focus on this for people who are taking on leadership roles, I think the rules have always been the same, and I think they always will be the same. If you do your job to the best of your ability, your team's going to see that. And they will want to work hard for you or for the team because you're doing your job. And the other thing that you touched on, and again, a lot of great information, but we want to make sure we pull out a couple things, is that sense of your word. Because too often, leaders say one thing and do another. But more importantly, when things start going well, they change the rules. Compensation changes, demands change. And all of a sudden, people start going, it becomes unstable, versus going back to our analogy of building that house. It's rock solid, because if Allan says this, I can put my head down on the pillow. I know Allan's true to his word, and I can focus on work, versus I have to waste any time interpreting or guessing what Allan really means. I mean, do you see that as you go into these businesses that are unsteady, so to speak? It's because of say one thing, do something else. Let's change the rules every single day, or when things get going well, we're going to pull the rug out from people.
Oh, you can smell them, 100 miles away. Just a toxic culture. of, it's interesting, the car industry as salespeople, when I started and until the day I finished, you were only paid on your work, which meant you had to sell cars, which meant you had to get as much money and profit into the deal to get a commission check.
Right.
There was no volume bonus. There was, it was like, no, sell a car, make as much money as you can. Wrong attitude. I mean,
right.
Because it became the attitude, it was the old school. And I'd worked for people like Cal Worthington and Tuttle Click. I worked for one of the greatest guys in the business, Al Parajakis. He is now one of Penske's, Western regional managers. He runs Crevier BMW. That was my last dealership that I worked at. And he had a beautiful culture. He looked after the community. He looked
right.
after the people that worked there. And he looked after the customers. And and go back to what you're talking about, that it ties into what you just asked me there, mate. If you look at the car industry, go back to post-World War II or pre-World War II, if you want. The local car dealership was a place of respect. You had to be successful to own a car.
Right.
Pre-World War II. Post-World War II, we got consumerism, and we had to, we grew as a world and economy, and freeways came in. So, volume of sales and giveaways started to occur. It became more transactional versus this interactional community feel of, I know the bank manager, I know the postmaster, I know the school, the headmaster, and I know the local car dealer, the local butcher and the baker. It was all a very
right.
tight community, right? We've become an environment that is just 6 of one, half a dozen other. You can get anything anywhere, which has created this competition that is prevalent in some businesses. And again, going back to the car industry, it's a competition. It's not a teamwork. You want to be the salesman that sells as many cars as they can, gets as many ups as they can. You've got to develop that teamwork that really does bring the people together as a unit versus this competitive dog-eat-dog world.
Well, I think you have to go back to what you were saying too. It's a great example because I remember we had different cars when we were growing up, be it a Pontiac or an Oldsmobile or Ford, but it was, my father always bought from his guy. And we drove a different vehicle, brand of vehicle, when he moved dealerships, but he bought it from people. And I think that to me is a leader, is you're creating an environment where people want to make a good business. Now, again, going back to car dealerships in a town, are we part of the town? Do we know people? Are we trying to build relationships, or are we just transacting? And I think that goes for even, building a team. Are you looking at your people as transactional? Like, I'll get the most out of Allan until I burn Allan out, and then Allan's out and I'll go find another person, versus really truly developing that team, knowing what Allan's skill sets are to help the team, or Allan's really good at this, but I got to work on this. Or maybe Allan is a great person. He should be part of our company, but he's in the wrong position. Let me go find, instead of getting rid of Allan, why don't I go, well, wait a minute. Allan really should be in this role over here. And then Allan flourishes because it's actually what he's good at, what he really likes to do. He just came in the door through this because he either maybe needed money, needed to pay the bill. So I'll do it. I don't love it. But I think that takes a lot of talent too. And I think the businesses that are really thriving, or leaders that thrive with team, really understand their people. Like you keep saying, it is that concept of building a family, building a team, a sports team. It's because you win, lose, practice, laugh, cry, all of that together. But you have someone on top going, this is the way we need to go, folks, and giving you that feedback. I mean, so give me.
Well, I mean, I want to jump in there, mate. You
Yeah.
just nailed it. I mean, the team, you've got a coach, you've got assistant coaches, you've got medical assistants, you got the water boy, you got the trainers. I mean, your team is not just the tip of the spear that you see in a dealership. When people think of car dealerships, what do they really think about? Most people go salespeople.
Right.
You got management, you got a business office, you got lot attendants, you got service staff, you got parts counter people. I mean, everybody contributes to that. Mm-hmm. And it is a community operation. I mean, I'll go back just to pull it all together here a little bit. I started selling cars and didn't want to because I had an ego problem that I'm a used car salesman in America. I stayed in it. I ended up selling with a partner a couple of hundred cars a month, all Dodge and Chrysler, all in Orange County in Southern California. He's still doing it. He's still cranking out over 150 new cars and some used cars a week on Harbor Boulevard, exactly where I started. We only ever moved because people didn't recognize and respect the loyalty and the integrity that we gave them because they messed with a pay program.
Right.
And we operated then just like he is doing right now. We sold cars to people with full transparency, treated it as a personal interaction, not a sales transaction. I wanted to sell them multiple cars within their family and their friends and family. We didn't want them to come to the dealership necessarily. We were happy to, but we offered them the opportunity to deliver the car to their office, which is where we wanted. This is in the 80s. Because if I delivered a new car or a used car to someone's office, what's the best advertising and marketing you've got is the person that's buying the car. And no one ever did that. So it spread through the community that these guys did the old-fashioned way. We brought it to them, did their finance, we did all these things. And we just continue to do that. We built out a database, before there was CRM was around, we didn't know we were doing this CRM solution. Handwritten cards. I still do it to people.
Sure.
There's nothing more important right now, mate, than hand addressing and handwriting a card and putting it in snail mail to somebody. That connection to the community, that team that you build together, I mean, that's where I want to go. If I wanted to get back into the retail car business, I could really easily into the same environment with the same product. I wouldn't go and try and sell Mercedes or Lexus or everybody else. 35 years later, I've still got people that contact me and friends, and you can build that same network of people around you the same way you build a company. Make it family. Treat it like family. There's nothing better than sitting around a table in a restaurant with the people you work with and breaking bread and having everybody feel respected and worthy and part of that team. It's simple. Sorry, I think I probably got off track.
No, because I think that is such a great way to sort of summarize our conversation here as we sort of wind down here, is the fact that the best leaders come in and identify and ask questions, and they get their plan together and they implement their plan. But there is that accountability. So leaders, new leaders, that's the key. You're going to fail. Fail is a good thing, but it's accountability. And it's treating everyone with respect, right? Not just your team, but understanding how your team fits into the ecosystem. And then more importantly, to your point, is any business, the lot attendant, right, in a dealership is just as important as the salespeople, right? I used to always say,
100%.
I always say, even in my company, my job as the CEO or part or whatever you want to say is no more important than anybody's. I just do a different job. I have different responsibilities to make the machine run, but so does everyone else, right? Because again, if I always looked at racing, like the pit crew. Someone can say, well, I'm the most important because I put the tire on. Well, without the person who's lifting the jack up, you're not putting a tire on. Oh, well, what about me? I put the gas in. I'm most important. It's like, no, it's this. It's everybody. And if everybody, and that's where you need the leader to make sure everybody's focused on that. And we're working together for a common purpose and that humanity into it versus transactional. I think that, to me, is the difference between really strong leaders. And for someone like yourself, you carry that and you bring that into your new situation. I think that's why people keep calling you. And that's why people keep wanting you, because that energy, that sense of purpose, that sense of direction, accountability, it's not as common as you would think it would be, but it's what everybody wants. And I think some of it's learned skills. I think you can learn a lot of it. But a lot of it is you have to be, I think the piece that maybe you're born with or not is the willingness to be accountable. That's not something that you can learn. It's either in you or it's not, for somewhere through your life. And I think to me, that's one of the biggest things for new leaders, is being able to look in the mirror and say, it's on me. I'll accept the responsibility. We'll figure it out, but it's that accountability.
Yeah, you've pretty much nailed it there. I think there's two things. A great leader needs to be a great teacher too.
Love that.
Because if you're not willing to teach and educate, which goes back to my comment about replacing yourself in your own position, if I can educate people and enhance their skill set to the point that I become replaced, I've succeeded in life and I've succeeded in the business world. What better way to make it a greater, more harmonious environment to live in?
That's a great place to end and wind this one up, because again, I just love that. Is like the best leaders are teachers, leaving your mark, leaving your impression on someone else, preparing them, and so you can move on. I think there's no greater gift from leaders, because I can look back at the few that, and to your point is, some of the ones who left some of the biggest marks were the ones who were the worst, because it warned me that's not the path you go down. But they're definitely people that have had great impacts on me. So I always ask everybody here as sort of the last question before we wrap up. So going to that, if you look back on your life and you were going to pass on a word of advice or something someone told you, or maybe just a lesson you've learned, and someone says to you, Allan, a piece of advice, give me a piece of advice to help me be a better leader, what would it be?
Wow. It's a good one. Off the top of my head, I start with, you got to believe in yourself, that you've got the ability. You got to love yourself. Too many people beat themselves up because of perceptions or expectations that are put on them. So, educate yourself. And education doesn't mean a university degree either, mate. I mean, I think that's one of the things. I think, yes, going to university, great. We live in a world where trade skills are disappearing. We're not all made to be, academics. Some of my smartest, most successful, financially, personally, professionally, friends in Australia never went to university, but they had great belief in themselves. They love themselves and the environment around them. And if you don't have that, you can't pass that on to others. And like I said, be a teacher. You can never put an old head on young shoulders. So to be able to share the mistakes or the successes that we've had and not be embarrassed about either of them, I think is really important in telling in people. I'm not afraid to admit the major mistakes I've made in my life and my business life as well. If that helps shapes or stops somebody else doing the same thing, then be willing to do that. Be able to laugh at yourself and let others laugh at you.
Right. That's
it's
always not the easiest one, but I think it's truly, I agree. I think that concept of, laugh at yourself and be willing to admit, some of the mistakes, because, it's a funny thing. There's always people who will say, man, if only I had done this, then, and I'm like, well, hindsight's really easy to say it would have all worked out. Somebody said, man, if I did that job at that time or made this decision, I'd have millions of dollars. And I said, yeah, but if you had millions of dollars, would you be where you are today? Maybe you would have done something stupid and been broke or in a worse shape than where you are now. So I think that's also a nice way to sort of wrap what you just said, is that we're at the point in our life because of all the things that have happened, good and bad, and share those versus trying to cherry pick, because sometimes the thing that in the moment you hated it the worst probably had one of the best impacts on you to get you where you are today. So I think that's
100%. 100%. I'll back that up right now, mate.
Great.
One of the worst experiences in my life has shaped me to where my successes are today.
And I think they help you appreciate those, but sometimes, as they say, you just never know. In the moment, Because even sometimes some of the best things that ever happened to you may cripple you or may stop you from taking that risk, and that you should have taken the risk, and you just never know. So again, thank you so much, Allan, for being with us. I mean, we could sit here and chat all day. Share with everybody where, if they wanted to connect with you on either on social media or whatever, if they wanted to connect, where they can find you.
Hey, cell phone's wide open. Easiest way, call, text. It's 949-903-3777. Social media, LinkedIn, it's Allan Cooper. Twitter, it's Allan Cooper.
Easy.
Facebook, yeah, I mean, I was very early adopter of all of these, so they're all out there as that. But yeah, you can find me at any of those channels and a few others. Happy to help anybody out. Always willing to, like I said, share my experiences and be a teacher and bring goodness to the world, mate, because we need a lot of it right now.
We do. Great words. So again, audience, thank you so much for your attention and being with us. Hope you got this far, because there's a lot of great things here at the end. Hope you'll watch it a couple times. As always, again, please subscribe. If you haven't, please share this out. There's so much great information that Allan shared. There's a lot of people who need it. And so that's our goal here. My goal when I started this channel was to educate, to be a teacher, to help those out there. So please share. As always, comments, love to hear them. And as I say at the end of every episode, you're in charge, but now Allan has given you a few more tools to help you become more successful. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time. Allan, again, thank you so much. I'll see you soon.